Hey photographers! The first thing that impressed me about the Nikon Z7 was the viewfinder. It's bright, crisp, and clear, the view feels larger than I expected, and the colors are pure and true. And I suppose if there's one initial impression that Nikon needs for this camera, that's it. The rest, Nikon's image quality, color science, feature set, and so on, we can take for granted. But in a high-end mirrorless camera, the viewfinder has to satisfy photographers who are likely coming from an optical viewfinder. We took the Z7 on a trip to Japan, Thailand, and Cambodia, as well as a wedding in California. We shot over 5,000 images day and night, inside, outside, in temples and shopping malls, of statues and people in traditional costume. I primarily used the viewfinder, and this video of the viewfinder recorded with my iPhone, the only thing that gets inside the iCup, doesn't do it justice. I did find the Z7 to be very sensitive. The image I get is exactly the image I see as I press the shutter with no lag. That's extraordinarily pleasant. And the Z7 uses a full-frame 36mm by 24mm sensor with a 46 megapixel resolution. That's impressive too. This is the Z7 with the 24-70 kit lens, which uses the new Nikon Z mount. Nikon also lent me the 35mm f1.8 prime and the FTZ adapter, which enables legacy f-mount lenses to be used with Z-mount bodies. We'll get to those. The Z-mount is a new larger lens mount than the Nikon f-mount used in their DSLR models. The Z7 has a simple, somewhat utilitarian and understated design. It's a magnesium alloy body with black plastic accents and covers. The red swoosh, usually in front, is on the side. And it is smaller and lighter, about 2/3 of the weight of the D850. The body weighs 585 grams, and it's weather sealed. The sealing components seem to be robust by those who've disassembled the camera, the standard 0 to 40 Celsius operating range. Now for my hand, the fit is superb. The grip is contoured for a very solid hold with my right hand, the thumb grip perfectly positioned. My index finger falls naturally on the combined on-off and shutter button, and it's surrounded by a video record button, ISO, and EV adjustment buttons, which are easy to find with my eye on the viewfinder. There's a front dial under the shutter button, and a back dial hangs out over the right back corner. They serve a variety of functions. The mode dial's on the left. It has a push-to-turn button, and I prefer push-to-lock-unlock. It's a very simple layout: auto, program, shutter, and aperture priority, manual, and 3 presets. Now, I found the dual custom function keys beside the lens on the right side to be innovative and useful. They're under my 3rd and 4th fingers, which, although it does require some new motor skills, combines with the other right side controls to provide the best single-hand control set that I've seen. The viewfinder's diopter adjusts using a pull-out dial, and it adjusts far enough for my prescription, and on the other side, the monitor mode button selects the display or switches automatically when the viewfinder senses an object. The 3.2 million dot LCD swivels up and down but not forward, and thoughtfully, there's enough clearance to do so even when it's mounted on a tripod release plate. And this is a touchscreen for tap and snap, touch focus, as well as changing settings and using the menu. Now there's no option to use the screen as a touchpad while shooting with the viewfinder. The stills video switch is beside the viewfinder, and the AF button is a little further to the right. Then down to the focus position joystick, the I button, and the control pad. One physical button position I didn't expect was menu on the right. It's typically on the left on Nikon bodies. But with an electronic viewfinder, the right makes sense, so you can easily get to it with your eye on the viewfinder. So thanks, appreciated. In fact, nearly all buttons are on the right side, which really makes sense. Only play and delete are on the left side. Again, a logical position. There's a card door on the right. The Z7 has a single XQD slot. I find XQD cards more solid and reliable than SD, and for the moment anyway, they support higher recording speeds. Of course, that comes at a price. The battery door is far away from the tripod mount, so changing batteries won't require you to remove the quick release plate. A plethora of ports on the left side, and an HDMI cable clamp is included, and that's appreciated by those using external monitors or recorders. These covers are weather sealed and marginally awkward. Mic in, headphone out, USB-C, and the slightly larger and more reliable HDMI mini, not micro port. Interestingly, there's a control panel display, and while it's useful displaying exposure settings, battery status, and remaining card space, all of that also appears on the viewfinder in the LCD or monitor. It would be more useful if some, like battery status and available card space, were displayed when the camera is off, but it's blank when powered down. The Z7 has Bluetooth, and using the free Nikon Snapbridge app can synchronize time and location with the smartphone and the camera, and transfer photos automatically, a feature I found quite useful while traveling, posting to Instagram while having a snack. The shutter's fast response is sadly offset with a very slow review, and it's not on by default. It's found on the playback menu. On displays either the monitor or the viewfinder. Monitor only doesn't display a review image when shooting with the viewfinder. The Z7 uses a full mechanical shutter, seen here in a 1-second exposure, and there is no explicit shutter control, but silent mode changes to electronic shutter and it is fully silent. And then in custom settings D5, an electronic front curtain control. Let's get those together in one place. The fastest electronic shutter speed is 1/2000. The Z7 has 3 sizes for JPEG and independent settings for RAW, 45, 25, and 12 megapixels, but you didn't buy the Z7 to take low-quality images. Although, if you're shooting RAW, a small JPEG helps conserve card space and is better suited to social media posts. Now, in addition to the uncompressed 24-bit TIFF, there are 3 quality settings, basic, normal, and fine, each with a star variant to maximize quality. All of those can be combined with RAW. The 24-70 lens has one slightly annoying characteristic. It must be rotated out before it can be used. Otherwise, it's a solid performer for this camera. I do suspect that eventually Nikon will release a line of premium Z lenses. As you can tell by the price, this is a high-end camera, and I found that I needed to take just a little more care to adjust the exposure and get the focus just right. Before setting the exposure, select the meter mode for the scene, press the I key on the right side or touch the I on-screen button. And this overlay menu is touch navigable. In addition to the 3 standard meter modes, matrix, center weighted, and spot, a very useful highlight mode makes sure that bright objects are never overexposed. Now, in operation, I found I wanted to change the meter modes frequently, usually to take advantage of highlight mode, so I assigned it to one of the function buttons on the right side of the lens mount, and that simplified access for me without repositioning my hand or eye. The exposure mode dial is remarkably simple. Push the lock button and turn to select. And let's start with Program, which automates both the shutter and aperture. Depending on lighting, you may need to adjust the ISO sensitivity by pressing the ISO key on top and turning the top dial. Automate this using the front dial, which switches in and out of auto mode. Program mode is flexible. Turn the top dial. Nikon calls this the main command dial for other combinations that also provide a proper exposure. And to lock the exposure, don't look for an AE lock button, press the joystick. AEL appears bottom left. There's a dedicated EV button. Press and turn either front or rear dial, 5 stops up and down with a numerical readout at the bottom of the screen. Now there's a custom option button B2. When on is selected, the rear dial adjusts EV without the need to hold the button, although now there's no EV numerical display, just the meter screen right. With reset, the EV value resets to 0 when the camera is powered off. In shutter priority, the rear dial selects the shutter speed from 30 seconds to 1/8000. A flash sync setting of X200 is available. In aperture priority, the front dial adjusts the iris. On the 24-70 lens, the aperture opens to a constant f4 and closes to f22. In manual, both controls are available. The screen right scale now displays the exposure to guide you to a properly exposed setting. Manual enables a timer mode, which opens the shutter with the first press and closes it with the second, as well as bulb mode. The shutter stays open as long as the shutter is pressed. The viewfinder and the monitor display the image that will be taken. A custom setting D8 overrides some settings, including color picture control and white balance. And by default, the display shows the widest aperture, so this f/22 image has a much deeper focus field than the preview. Assign one of the custom buttons to preview and then press it to see the actual focus result. ISO can be set from 64 to 25,600, and then the extended mode adds one stop below 64 and 2 stops above 25.6. The auto ISO settings include a minimum both without and with flash, and a triggering shutter speed. Now, while using auto ISO settings, the Z7 often took images at the highest available ISO, 25.6, and although they're free of color shifts, they are kind of mushy. And I'd always prefer to make dynamic range adjustments in Lightroom, but Nikon provides 2 options for in-camera settings. Active D-lighting offers 4 dedicated, as well as an auto mode, and although they should be adjacent, you'll find HDR mode a few screens down. In addition to auto, up to 3 stops of range can be set. The focus system is also quite straightforward. On the I menu, you'll find single, manual, and continuous, where the camera continues to focus while the shutter is soft pressed, and in video mode, full time, which does the same thing without requiring the soft press. Soft press the shutter or use the dedicated AF on button to focus. Focus is fast and confident. In single focus, 4 sizes are available: wide, large and small, single point, and pinpoint. Using either the joystick or the control circle, single point can be positioned on a 29 by 17 grid, which covers nearly the entire screen with 493 points. Pinpoint, which covers a slightly smaller area, has more points than I care to count. And pinpoint is accurate to very small objects at the edges. Nice. Now, if that feels like too many points to work with, custom setting A5 jumps over every other point for faster navigation. And of course, there is the touchscreen to select any point quickly. That works well in video mode also for a rack focus while recording, although the transition's not as smooth as I'd like. Auto area is the full auto mode, and this mode includes object tracking, so I set up my Playmobil train and switch to continuous mode. Press OK for the selection square, press OK again to track the object, which it does. However, it doesn't focus, even when I press the AF on button. In burst mode, it does focus while shooting. With custom setting A1 on focus, you can hear it's not updating as quickly as the burst speed. I set A3 to quick, but that didn't help. There are 2 ways to get to manual focus, either using a switch on the lens or using the I menu. With manual focus, on-screen indicators appear bottom left to guide you to focus. There's a dedicated AF on button for back focus, but you have to use the custom setting menu option A7 to select AF on only to disable shutter autofocus. The focus bracket, or focus shift to use the Nikon term, can be used to create a series of images with changes in focus. And this can be used either to make sure that you have a sharp image of an object that's difficult to focus, or to create a focus stack. The closest tulip is about 40 centimeters, the 24 to 70 is at 50 millimeters, f4, and the farthest tulip is about a meter away. Now, after some trials, I found that 20 images with the maximum step width of 10 would cover front to back. With 0 interval, the shots are continuous. I set peaking stack image to on, and then started. Although you hear the shutter click, there is no screen display while shooting. Reviewing the images shows the focus progress. Press I and select Display Peaking Stack Image to see if all objects were focused, and then you can take them to Photoshop to create the stacked image. The I menu has white balance presets, and there are more than usual. There are 3 variations of auto, each of which include color shift options. A second auto for natural light, and then the standard set. But even here, fluorescent has 5 variations. The Kelvin settings are more precise than most, and there are 6 custom presets. Capturing a custom preset is relatively straightforward. Press and hold the OK button to enter preset capture mode, position the square over a neutral white reference, and press OK again to capture. All set. Now, I've been showing this using the full menu, but you can shortcut this using the front and rear dials for an expert mode. With white balance set, select a color profile. Nikon calls these picture controls. There are a variety of presets to choose from, including neutral and flat, which would be useful for video to be color graded, and then an Easter egg feature, 20 different effect modes, which may or may not appeal to you. Now, all of these also have sub-controls to customize the adjustments to your taste, and again, Nikon offers more control than most. 3 types of sharpening, as well as contrast, brightness, saturation, and hue. And these adjustments, as you can see here with saturation, are relatively meaningful. Of course, these settings are applied only to JPEG files, so you'll always have a clean RAW version. The Z7 brochure promises 5 stops of 5-axis stabilization, and there's a menu setting, vibration reduction, with 3 settings, normal, sport, and off. Handheld, and framing with the LCD, not the viewfinder, this is off at 70mm, and that's my inherent shake. Switch to DX crop and it's pretty obvious. Turning vibration reduction on gives an excellent impersonation of a tripod. And then I started snapping and was able to shoot without blur to 1/2 second. That's about 5 stops from the 1/60th I feel is my minimum. The manual says sports mode is when both you and your subject are moving. The Nikon 24-70 f4S is a solid feeling lens, tipping the scales at 500 grams. The filter diameter is 72mm, and I'm not sure what the S represents, but I suspect it's a generic stabilization badge. It's a constant f4 to f22. The closest focus is 30 centimeters, and if you can work at that distance, the bokeh is quite pleasant. With custom setting f2, it's easy to overlook the last control, which selects the function of the lens's focus ring. It can adjust focus, aperture, or exposure compensation. Nice. G2 has independent settings for video. The selection here is called power aperture, and the adjustments are nicely smooth. In both modes, with manual focus, it reverts to focus. Now, switching lenses in the field with a mirrorless camera makes me nervous, and carrying multiple lenses is a little more than I want to shoulder all day, so I didn't shoot much with the 35mm, but it is a nice clean lens. And I guess we can expect all Z lenses to be a good size. This one weighs 370 grams. There's an auto manual focus switch and a focus ring, and this is a full-frame FX lens. Filter diameter 62mm. It opens to f1.8, closes to f16. The closest focus is 25 centimeters. And it also supports the ability to use the focus ring for aperture and EV. The third Z-mount lens is a 50mm. So, for the moment anyway, there aren't many Z-mount lenses. And that makes the FTZ adapter a useful accessory if you have existing F-mount lenses that you'd like to use, or if there isn't a Z-mount lens suited to your needs. It's fairly small and light and there are no controls. It extends below the body of the camera so the tripod mount is appreciated. I tried it out with the Nikon DX 55-200 zoom. As expected, the Z7 recognizes that it's a DX lens and crops accordingly, so there's no vignette. Aperture, including power aperture in video, works as expected, even while recording a pleasant surprise. Focusing is slow with some hunting, and the pinpoint mode doesn't work nearly as well as with the native Z-mount lenses. From the dedicated drive mode button, set a 2 to 20 second timer, and then dig down to custom settings C2 to select 1 to 9 shots, and an intershot delay up to 3 seconds. That should enable you to get in the shot and make sure everyone's eyes are open. At D4, if all you need is a shutter delay, that can be set from 0.2 to 3 seconds, but it isn't as easily activated or disabled. For burst, there are continuous low, 1 to 5 frames per second, and high, which is rated for 5.5 images per second. Using extended high with manual exposure and focus settings and saving fine star JPEGs in the bottom right, the remaining frame switches to buffer status when I start shooting. The Z7 recorded 9 frames for about 3 seconds before the buffer fills and then slows to about 4 per second. In 2018, for a camera in this class, that's disappointing. I tried with the silent shutter. It is silent, and there's no on-screen indication other than the buffer to show that you're shooting. And that runs about 8 per second for 3 seconds before slowing to 4. I went back to high, which holds 5.5 frames per second for 10 seconds before slowing to 4. Now, there's one setting I don't understand, and that's the limitation of 200 images in burst mode. I know that you will want to explain or justify this, but this unnecessary limitation is unique to Nikon. So let's put in a request for an upgrade, whether it's in the Z8 or Z7 Mark II, to include a larger buffer and no limitation. In a camera which requires me to create focus stacks and panoramas manually, it's odd to find multiple exposure, one of the easier tasks to do in post. Should you decide to use it, Nikon provides more capability than the competition. Choose to take one or a series with from 2 to 10 images, 4 overlay modes, the ability to save the individual images and overlay to see the images as you proceed. And then I discovered an Easter egg. When you combine multiple exposure with continuous, the images are taken at burst speed, creating an interesting superimposed action series. The interval timer is also full-featured, with start time and date, interval lengths up to 24 hours, up to 10,000-1 intervals, with up to 9 shots each, and the ability to create a dedicated folder for the images. Oddly found on this stills menu and not available when external monitor is connected, there's also time-lapse movie mode, again with a full set of features including output up to 4K 30 frames. I've always felt that DSLR-style cameras are not totally happy shooting video. Video mode on the mirrorless Z7 is activated by turning the selector. If that looks like it's cropping in, let me go back to stills and set image area to switch the stills aspect to 16:9. Then you'll see that there's no crop in video mode. Video mode has an independent menu, and many of the settings like white balance and picture control can either be the same as photo or independent. And that also applies to the shutter, aperture, ISO, and meter mode. Switching between video and stills, each retains their own settings. That's thoughtful engineering. Custom settings G1 and G2 customize the I menu and the control keys for video. In video mode, image area selects either FX, the full sensor, or DX for a 1.5 crop, useful to extend your zoom. Press the video button to record. Recordings are limited by card space or 30 minutes. Resolutions up to 16:9 or UHD 4K, with frame rates up to 30 are available. In HD 1080, 120 and 60 are supported, as well as 3 slow motion modes. And note that 120 frames and the slow-mo modes force a DX crop. Now, in HD, there are 2 quality settings which equate to data rates. The 4K data rate is about 120 megabits. At HD, high quality is 25 megabits, while normal records at 13 megabits. That all feels slightly disappointing on a camera that uses XQD cards that's capable of much higher data rates. Both MOV and MP4 are available, and both use the same H.264 video codec. The difference is audio. MOV uses PCM, MP4 uses AAC. It would be nice if the shutter button would start and stop video recording, but I should note that custom setting G3 configures the OK button as record start stop. And for all the things that Nikon did right for video mode, they didn't go all in. There are a lot of essential features missing or incompletely implemented. The good? There's a fairly extensive timecode function. There's focus peaking for manual focus, configured on custom setting D10. There are 4 color options and 3 sensitivity settings. But it has to be turned off to access the limited zebra function, G6, highlight display, using RGB instead of the more standard waveform values. 224 is about 100%. Both of these can be assigned to the I menu, focus peaking to a custom button. Another handy customization is power aperture open and close, which can be assigned to the function buttons beside the lens. Then use them to increase or decrease your aperture. In general, cameras with an HDMI output have a setting to select whether the output is a clean, recordable feed or includes the menu and screen overlays. And that's not available here. In video mode, only a clean feed is available. That means most of this section is shot from the LCD screen. And the HDMI options, most of which apply specifically to video, have been relegated to the setup menu. The HDMI output follows the movie menu frame size frame rate setting. These options can lower but not raise the resolution, so when frame size is set to 4K, you can use this setting to force it to HD, but not the reverse. In the advanced options, the output data depth can be set to either 8 or 10 bits. Using 10-bit for external recordings prevents some size and rate options from recording internally, and I'm not sure why this might be an issue when the Z7 uses XQD cards. Also available only for external recording is Nikon's NLog format. This also overrides the ability to record internally, and that's unfortunate. NLog has a minimum ISO of 800 and adds 2 to 3 stops to the effective dynamic range. Nikon has not yet provided a LUT for this feature. The View Assist setting changes the response of the LCD so that it doesn't look washed out while using NLog. And note that if you do plan to use an external recorder, set C3, the power off delay, standby timer, to no limit. The same vibration reduction for stills is also available with an independent setting for video. And there's also an electronic VR setting. With the same handheld shot and DX crop you saw in stills, here's video with electronic VR. Solid. To evaluate the Z7's susceptibility to rolling shutter, I turned both vibration reduction and electronic VR off, just so they're not trying to compensate. With 4K video mode, the Z7 shows quite a bit of bending as I pan back and forth. But then switching to HD 1080, not so much. So if you need a fast pan... Face detection is enabled on custom setting A4 and works with auto area AF autofocus continuous in stills and full-time in video. I found it works well. It does feel a little bit like cheating to use an f1.8 lens for my one candle test shot, but it is all part of the Nikon Z system. So with the shutter at 1/60th f1.8, and I captured a custom white balance, as the Kelvin setting only goes down to 2500, and candlelight is typically around 1800. Now I'm using the flat color profile, and this is ISO 6400. You'll see some noise in the bottom left, but turning it up higher would only be noisier, and I'm actually quite happy with the way that this shot looks now. There are not many cameras that can take stills without interrupting a video recording, but the Z7 can. Just press the shutter button. The touch shutter doesn't work in video mode. Now the only limitation, these images are 16:9 video aspect 8 megapixel images, even smaller than small JPEGs. Only Nikon provides both a playback and an independent retouch menu. The playback menu includes settings for playback display options to view photo details, but I'm not sure why these aren't on by default. The retouch menu, in addition to the usual, like crop, resize, and red eye removal, includes distortion control to adjust the effects of wide-angle lenses, and perspective control to adjust the keystone effect. And you could easily overlook image overlay, which creates a multi-exposure image from two photos. Now, it's not as full-featured as the photo mode version, but still useful. And then there's an extensive raw processing module, which includes the ability to set image quality, adjust the exposure value, select another picture control option, including the effects, or adjust the active de-lighting to modify the dynamic range. This is as good as it gets. In Lightroom, although the JPEG files are large, I was able to make a wider range of adjustments than is typical with JPEG files, and the RAW files enable even more exposure latitude. Now, even if you're not familiar with Nikon's menu system, it's logical and well laid out. One issue I have is that the scrolling list on some of the tabs is getting a little long, and there are a few settings that aren't where they should be. And I'm still not sure what it takes to make a setting qualify as a custom setting as opposed to a setup, like power off delay. That's a setup feature. Customization makes it easy to get to your most used features either with custom buttons or via the I menu. And if you prefer, you can use My Menu to create a custom page of settings. The Help feature, while not available for all settings, is useful, but the generic message for a setting that's not available isn't. The manual, and there are two available for download, both a user manual and a reference manual, also doesn't list the exclusions for some settings and features. I did not use the user settings. I think it's because I can't remember which settings I assigned, but also because they can't be explicitly configured. For a mirrorless camera, battery life on the Z7 is better than average. I shot a lot while we were traveling, but never ran out of power in a day. A battery charger is provided, and the camera can be powered or charged using the USB port. Nikon clearly has invested the Z7 with excellent quality and good usability engineering. Once I had the controls customized, I quickly felt at home, able to make the adjustments easily. And with the exception of burst speed and buffer, stills features feel complete. But there is room for more capability in the video configurations. Thanks for watching. I enjoy interacting with you, so I reply to relevant questions and civil comments. Go out and shoot until your memory card is full and your battery is empty. And if this channel and my content pleases you, it would please me to have you as a subscriber. Thanks. Done.